Frogs is a low-budget eco-horror film from the early 70s. In it, the wildlife on a small island strikes back against the eccentric Crockett family during their annual 4th of July celebration. This is one in a string of films to come out in the 70s railing against the ills of man and spouting environmental and social awareness, as today, those are popular issues of the time.
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country. And some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it.
Yes, that was a real commercial. People weren't as sensitive back then. Films like The Omega Man, The China Syndrome, and The Crazies focus more on the ills of nuclear power and medical research, and are actually pretty good movies. But Frogs had its sights set squarely on man's pollution of the planet and encroachment into nature. It's more in the vein of creature features like Long Weekend and Locust, which weren't that good. I first saw Frogs when I was a kid on a Sunday afternoon horror TV block, and didn't think much of it at the time. In fact, I thought it was kind of boring. But watching it again during last year's October Horror Challenge, which is basically an excuse to binge on horror movies for an entire month, I kind of enjoyed it for the schlocky, socially conscious horror movie it was. I was, however, left with one lingering question. Why is Frogs called Frogs? Pickett Smith is the film's protagonist. He is, well, I'll let him tell you.
I'm a freelance photographer. I'm doing a pollution layout for an ecology magazine.
So he's basically paddling a canoe around taking pictures of trash, to show how detrimental humankind is to the planet. He's the good guy. His apparent concern for the environment and his mode of transportation are the clues. And in case you hadn't noticed, he's played by a young mustacheless Sam Elliott. The setup for Frogs isn't a horrible one, and it's been used in several other movies to varying degrees of effectiveness. Here they really only show a bit of litter and a couple of drainage pipes emptying into a swamp, and while unsightly, none of it is particularly threatening to the environment. It certainly doesn't warrant nature's desire to wipe humans off the face of the earth. But this was a small film, and it gets the point across well enough, I suppose. Pickett is working on his magazine assignment near Jason Crockett's island when one of the Crockett clan capsizes his canoe in a near collision while driving a speedboat recklessly and drinking beer. He is one of the bad guys. The alcohol consumption and his mode of transportation are the clues. As a show of apology for the accident, Pickett gets invited to the island for lunch, which he reluctantly accepts. The reasoning for Pickett being on the island at all, and even more for him staying after finding a dead body on it, is really the only stretch in logic of the script. Well, beyond the title. No, they don't establish the threat that man poses to nature very well, but if you don't buy that going in, you're watching the wrong movie. Some may argue if you're watching Frogs at all, you're watching the wrong movie, but bear with me. When Pickett gets back to the island, he's introduced to Jason Crockett. Jason is played by an aging Ray Milland and the only other decent actor in the film. He's the patriarch of the Crockett family and represents the evil of man. But he is honestly a pretty straight-up guy that offers good parenting advice, had a successful career, and even overcame an illness that left him in a wheelchair. But he's an old rich white man, so he's evil. Jason learns of Pickett's work assignment, and they discuss the frog infestation on the island. Frogs do seem to be everywhere, but seem relatively harmless. We're not going to address the fact that they actually use toads during filming, which isn't even my main issue with the movie's title. It comes up in discussion that one of Jason's employees has disappeared, and Jason asks Pickett if he can look for the missing man while exploring the island. Pickett agrees to keep an eye out for the man while looking for solutions to the frog problem. Of course, Pickett finds the missing employee dead. This is the point where Pickett should get the hell off the island. But Jason somehow convinces him to keep quiet about the mysterious death so his annual 4th of July celebration can go off without a hitch. They honestly do give Jason Crockett a bit of reasoning for wanting to stay on the island. He's an evil rich old white guy and the main motivating factor of the plot. But this isn't just their annual 4th of July celebration. 4 of the Crockett clan have birthdays in July, and they always celebrate them on the island during the week of the 4th. Crockett is set in his ways and steeped in tradition, so that's his excuse. He also doesn't look at the hired help as equals. He's not too emotionally affected by the death of his employee and still wants to get his party on. Pickett, on the other hand, I don't get his reasoning for staying. It's just not there. And for a low-budget horror film, the script is surprisingly airtight otherwise. They don't call the cops because the phones are out. They have access to guns because Jason is a hunter. There's a scene where one of the characters goes to search for someone that's late coming home, but before she goes outside, they show her grab the pair of binoculars she's going to be using in the next scene. Not giving Pickett reasonable motivation to stay on the island bugged me is all I'm saying. It was also odd to see a movie this weak with a script as solid as this one's. Guess I'm just used to modern Hollywood's low-effort output, but almost all of the faults with Frogs lie in the physical production. But all of that is plot. The story of Frogs touches on elements of environmentalism, race relations, dysfunctional family dynamics. It's a pretty socially aware flick, even if only topically. One of the Crockett men is in an interracial relationship with a black woman. They talk around it in ways to let the audience know it's an issue without having Jason flat out say he's not for race mixing, because all old rich white guys are racist, of course. Two of the hired help are stereotypically black house servants that the black girlfriend has an immediate bond with, because they're black and all black people get along, of course. And then there's this scene.
Really, it's not a small crisis. You got to see that.
I see who's loyal and who isn't. That's what I see. Now, if you want to go, both of you will go. Do you?
Maybe you haven't heard about it stuck out here in vacation land. But 7 years ago, they just started letting people make up their own minds.
Mr. Crockett, I wish you'd change your mind for your own safety.
The black people are the only ones to attempt to escape the island when things start getting hairy.
Whoop, time to go.
But as expected, they still don't survive. I wonder what all of the people who heaped insane amounts of praise on the daring and original Get Out would have to say about this film, but that's straying off topic. From about 1/3 of the movie in, it's pretty much one death scene after another and in fairly rapid succession. And the death scenes are, let's say, peculiar. I couldn't even discern the cause of death for the first on-screen victim. Tell me if you can. I'm not really sure what's happening here. Are the vines supposed to be sentient? Is he being asphyxiated, or did the tarantulas drop the vines on him like nets? Is he killed by the tarantula's venom? I don't know. But it was a fascinating scene to watch for the absurdity of it alone. After most of the Crocketts are killed by a various assortment of wildlife, Pickett and the few remaining survivors finally do decide to vacate the island. After fighting off some snakes, Pickett and company do make it back to the mainland and presumably to safety. But maybe nature's revolt wasn't limited to the island alone. Jason refused to leave the island with Pickett. He's still determined to spend his fourth where he always does, and doesn't believe anything nefarious is afoot, chalking up the known deaths to accidents and the missing people to alcohol. And this takes us right to the end of the movie. At this point, you may be wondering why I question the title of the film. There's a frog infestation on an island, people are going missing and being killed, and it seems to add up, right? But you may have noticed what I did while watching Frogs. What many have. That is that frogs don't actually kill anyone. Not until the last scene, anyway. Lizards, snakes, alligators, leeches, spiders, turtles, birds, and even crabs do a bulk of the killing. Frogs are around, sure. There are quite a few shots of them sprinkled throughout the movie. Take a look for yourself.
Gigantic.
That's a lot of frogs. But all they ever do is hop around, croak, and stare blankly into space. I don't know, maybe they're supposed to be the ringleaders of the animal revolution? If I imagine hard enough, I guess I could see them directing their animal minions with their minds as they stare on at their handiwork with bulging eyes reveling in the fall of mankind. But I'd have to imagine that. It's not on screen. I don't blame the director for throwing in animals that could conceivably kill a person. Frogs aren't a particularly threatening movie villain. But then why didn't they change the title? All in all, Frogs isn't that bad for what it is. If you're into horror schlock or cult classics, you'll get a kick out of it. It's directed by George McCowan, who, after a cursory IMDb search, did a lot of TV, mainly in the 70s and 80s, but not many films, and I guess you can see why. He did an okay job here for a movie that needed a much larger budget and perhaps a savvier crew. I can only assume that the story of Frogs was easier to conceive of than to execute. They did use live animals, and I can imagine it's difficult to get real animals to look like they're murdering people believably. But it's also probably much cheaper than using puppets or animatronics, which would have been the way to go here. Judging from the quality of one of the fake animals they did use, they seem to have just been attempting to make the best of a bad situation. In case you're wondering, we actually do get one frog kill in the movie. The frogs, or toads, take out the patriarch of the Crockett family by crawling on him after he inexplicably falls out of his wheelchair. I know I couldn't think of a way to make frogs seem like a worthy threat, and it seems like the filmmakers couldn't either. But for some reason they pushed the frog angle pretty hard. Maybe they thought it was better to have a single creature as the selling point. Maybe they tried to shoot the deaths with frogs and realized how silly it looked, so opted for other creepy crawlies. Maybe they just bit off more than they could chew. I don't know what was going on behind the scenes. But Frogs, a mildly entertaining movie, if not for the right reasons, falls very flat in the last scene, and in large part due to budgetary constraints, but also due to an unusual desire to have frogs as the monster and a creature feature. I don't know what they could have done to remedy the problems I have with the movie, outside of changing the title, but I personally would have gone with this as the final shot of the film.
Did your car break down?
No, it's a long story. Thanks for stopping.
Well, we're headed for Jefferson City. I just picked my son up at camp.
Hi, I'm Bobby. Hi.
We've been on this road for practically 3 hours straight, and you're the first souls we've seen in an hour. It seems very strange that everybody's disappeared inside on a holiday.
Hey, you want to see what I caught? They were all over the place at camp. Ever seen a monster big as him before?